the vital construction sector. Joining me live now to respond, Assistant Treasurer and, of course, within that portfolio, Michael Suker. Thanks very much for your time.
G'day, Tom.
$500 million, vital repairs, and Labor says it would push state governments to match if it were in that position. It seems like a win for residents and for tradies as well. What's your response?
Well, it would be a very heroic assumption for them to make that the states would match it. Secondly, the experience from the global financial crisis is clear in programs like this, particularly being administered through state and territory housing departments. Not a dollar of this would be seen until late next year. That's the reality of it. So as a stimulus measure, it clearly wouldn't work. And when you look at the size of it, $500 million, and you compare it to what the Morrison government's doing with Home Builder, which, according to the HIA, leads to $10 to $15 billion of investment, which has turbocharged, quite frankly, the residential construction industry, it would make no difference, and it wouldn't assist for the critical moment now, which is what Home Builder does and what the First Home Loan Deposit Scheme does with an additional 10,000 places. So last night, I think, was very underwhelming to see that announcement, and to bill it as a stimulus measure is clearly false. It would not have any impact until late next year.
They're obviously talking about they're not scrapping any of the schemes you mentioned, so this is an addition. Is it true 100,000 of our social housing stock need urgent maintenance?
Well, there's no doubt that around the country that state and territory governments have allowed their housing stock to some degree to be degraded. I think the heroic assumption again last night was that $500 million would somehow renovate 100,000 homes. That works out to be $5,000 per home. That, I think, again, looking at the GFC experience, is false.
Well, Labor hasn't said it would fix every house, though, in this policy, has it?
No, they've stated that it would assist 100,000 homes. Completely inadequate, what the funding they've put towards it. So they haven't done their maths. It's not a measure that would help the residential construction industry now, and it certainly wouldn't help the thousands of builders around the country who are being assisted by the Morrison government, because you'd have to be one of the very fortunate builders who have a contract with the state government to even engage in this sort of program. So
presumably if you get a big program like this, you get more contractors in.
That's the point. It's not a big program at all. It won't make any difference, certainly not in the most critical moment, which is between now and the end of the financial year. This is when we need to keep tradies busy. That's why Home Builder, a wildly successful scheme, and the First Home Loan Deposit Scheme are really front-ended to the moment when the construction industry needs it, which is between now and the middle of next year.
I want to get onto Home Builder in a moment, but just on this as well, I mean, this was a huge budget, can't remember the updated figure, 18 billion in deficit. What was spent on social housing, specifically social housing? Well,
social housing we spend each year, $1.3 billion through the National Housing and Homelessness Agreement, $4.6 billion through Commonwealth Rental Assistance.
So any increase?
$2.5 billion through the National Housing Finance Investment Corporation, with an additional $1 billion on Tuesday night, which we announced through the National Housing Finance Investment Corporation. So
this is for affordable housing, that last amount.
That includes social community affordable housing. So that's through the mechanism that delivers to all of those types of housing stock, $1 billion additional.
How is that split?
That we put in.
That was described more often as affordable housing rather than social housing.
Well,
is that split in a particular way?
Absolutely. So the National Housing Finance Investment Corporation, through its bond aggregator, assists with community housing providers. We've just announced, for example, fast-tracking of 781 new homes with the New South Wales government, which includes social housing, their social housing stock. So our budget delivers more for social housing than what the Labor Party proposed.
They're just proposing on top. Let's just clarify that.
They've proposed it as a stimulatory measure that we know from experience would not have a single person working on a home until late next year. That's not stimulus for when we need it. And the maths is wrong. Saying that somehow $500 million would lead to repairs of 100,000 homes is wildly wrong. So they've not done their maths. They've been very lazy in this policy. And I note this morning that there's not a great deal of enthusiasm for it because it's so inadequate.
The home builder scheme you spoke about, there are complaints that deadlines are too tight. So there are these deadlines for a contract signing and then beginning of the build. And a lot of builders are saying we're having to turn away business, and others concern people that are signed up, they won't have the soil turned, if you like, within that March deadline. Is that being looked at?
Well, there's already flexibility within the scheme for states to extend the deadlines, and I mean, it's a nice problem to have. In the midst of a pandemic, where one of the issues with the home builder scheme is it's been so successful, it's brought forward so much demand that, as you say, builders are now getting to the point where they're thinking, well, we might struggle to do all the work on the order book. So we get that.
Yeah,
so
it's not a nice problem for someone that thought they were getting 25,000, they might not.
It's a nice problem for the industry, I can tell you.
But not for the person who thought they were getting a $25,000 cheque.
Well, look, there's still no doubt capacity in the industry to be able to do those projects. There's flexibility for the state governments through their state revenue offices to extend deadlines where, effectively through no fault of the applicant, there's a delay, whether it's a delay in an approval that's required, a delay in titling the land. So there's already an opportunity for them to extend that by 3 months. Having said all that, because Home Builder has been so remarkably successful, we're keeping a very close eye on it. We're looking at it. There's been significant calls from the industry, whether it's the Master Builders Association, the HIA, who have said, Home Builder has rescued our industry. We want you to extend it. And the PM has made clear we'll keep a very close eye on it between now and its deadline on 31 December. And in watching it closely, there might be opportunities to do that.
And that could be crucial because Treasury actually reports, and you said this as well, it's pulling forward demand. So that means not creating new demand. Immigration is set to go backwards, a massive change. There could well be a cliff we're approaching for home building and the construction sector.
But that's why we've focused so much effort on first home buyers. So in the budget on Tuesday night, we announced an additional 10,000 places under the first home loan deposit scheme, which allows Australians to purchase a property with a deposit of as little as 5%. But we added one additional requirement for that extra 10,000, and that was it must be for the purchase of a new home. Because we recognise that in order to fill that pipeline of work which is needed, and it's a pipeline that's needed now, we're going to need to bring new demand into the market, and that's Australian first home buyers. And the Morrison government, whether it's the First Home Super Saver Scheme, First Home Loan Deposit Scheme or Home Builder, we're the party of aspirational first home buyers. And I'm very comfortable filling that hole with Australians who want to get into their first home.
Right, and you can do as much as you can to funnel that demand. There's a bringing forward, there's perhaps creating
There is additionality, there's no doubt
some new, but these houses, you don't build houses for nobody. We're talking about 200,000, possibly fewer homes, and these are Treasury estimates based on immigration. Something is coming here down the pipeline, isn't it? If somehow all these new homes are built, there's going to be empty rental homes all over the place.
But Tom, this is our objective. Our objective is to make sure that in this time we don't have a lessening of supply, because what that will do is, over the long term, and the long lead times with property means that when net overseas migration gets back to a normal level...
When is that, though?
Well, the budget
10 years
paper...
away.
No, in the budget we outline, over the medium term that will happen, that you don't want another situation as we've had in the past where the demand for housing far exceeds supply.
We're nearly out of time.
When
does that happen?
To make sure...
When do we get to normal immigration?
Well, over the medium term, I think it's very, very difficult. Very, very difficult for me to pinpoint exactly when that will happen. But what you don't want, Tom, in the context of housing, is for supply to be so constrained now that when that does happen, you have an imbalance between the supply of new housing and your demand for it. And what happens in that situation? You see exponential rises in pricing and unaffordability.
Right.
And that's, again, what Home Builder will do. It assists that, a very successful scheme, and we can understand why so many Australians are calling for it to be extended.
Michael Sukkar, thanks for your time today.
Good on you, Tom. Thank you.
Let's go to some